successful people. It's time to pay respect to our ancestors. Which one did you miss? None of you were fornicating. I beg your pardon?
I was fornicating.
Yeah, you were. Think about it. Think about it. Ape behavior is, there's a lot of fornication going on. So, that's management. Management comes from the word meaning to control or restrain. Right? It also curiously seems to have a root in the word manager, right, which is horsemanship. The ability to rein in or to restrain or manage, control, right? So from the point of view of business, management is the allocation and use of resources and determined and predetermined and channeled ways, right? This is, you're not just all over the map, you're using this for this and that for that. And that's a restraining and controlling function. So from our point of view as businessmen and women, business people, we manage our resources, don't we? Curiously enough, we manage our resources probably more personally than we do anything else in our lives. In other words, as a teacher of Dharma, I will often hear the intricacies of people's sex lives, but if I ask them about their bank accounts, we're on touchy ground. So again, that's because money or resources represent survival. So anyway, this class is going to be all over the map. I let you know. And in many ways will be quite disjointed and speculative, right? So I think this weekend's supposed to have something to do with management, isn't it? So that's the management bit. We evolved from the great apes, arguably, or our ancestors impregnated the great apes or something. But in any case, however you phrase it, the great apes are the only creatures with mirror neurons and spindle cells. And those two functions have a huge amount of effect on management. The spindle cells help you restrain and control behavior and to work with others, I suppose. And the mirror neurons have a lot to do with empathy and understanding how someone else is feeling and emotion and being able to feel other person's pain and so on. So as we came out of the trees as apes, right, and only the great apes, curiously enough, have mirror neurons and spindle cells. Because you need large brains in order for that thing to emerge. So a child doesn't ride a bicycle before he learns how to walk, right? So it's not until the child walks that riding bicycles emerge, right? You don't go from crawling to figure skating, usually, unless you're from Western Canada. But you go from crawling to walking and so on. So there's a lot of behaviors that are emergent. They can only happen when other things happen. So it's very rare, for instance, awareness, compassion, wisdom, and strength. It's very rare, for instance, for a person to develop certain talents until other talents have emerged, right? And you can think about almost anything. You don't get on a horse as a rule and become a Olympic jumper. You don't get up and you might dance around as a kid, but you don't have a controlled, managed dance until you get older. When I was learning how to play the clarinet, the first thing you wanted to do is make a lot of noise. And the mistake often that's made by adults is they push the management a little bit too early. So for me, it kind of killed my interest in the clarinet when I wanted to make noise and they wanted lessons. And so the interest was a bit dampened by the management of the noise. And in defense of my parents, if there's not much worse than a bad clarinet player. A bad piano player, you can kind of somehow, you can kind of live with it, like, kind of your like fingers down the blackboard, right? With clarinets. Anyway, so as we emerge out of the forest, right, and we have to stand up on two legs like gophers, right, to see what's coming, because on all fours you can't see much, and if you're out in the plains and the savanna, you want to see what's coming along. So we need to stand up and we need to improve our communication skills, because one tree is here, one tree is here. You can kind of swing from branch to branch during communication. But as you get out in the savanna, things are getting farther away. So you need better communication skills and you need faster brains. And it seems like spindle cells emerge in the great apes because it gets bigger brains. You need faster communication over large areas. You might say email or the internet. You might say the internet is a development out of spindle cells, because it's a bigger network. You need faster communication. So we have the little colon with the little bracket means a smile, and LOL means laughing out loud, and hi means hello, and so on and so on. So hi is a management system for hello, right? It's making it more efficient, making it shorter, make it quicker. So language is going to get more digital as we go along. So if you read the literature of the 19th and 20th century, the early 20th century, it's quite descriptive, isn't it? Laws and passages are describing the greenness of the tree. Or even old movies. Excuse me, you watch old movies and you kind of, come on, let's go, come on, get to the bed scene, okay, good, kill them, right? Okay, get them reborn, right? Let's move it along. You watch some of the old movies, and okay, they're great, we love them, but sometimes you're going, alright. Anyway, so as we emerge out of the trees, these things start to develop. Curiously enough, the only other creature that has a large number of spindle cells are the crustaceans, the whales.
Cetaceans? Cetaceans.
Sorry. The cetaceans. Thank you very much. I'm being a great ape and shortening it. Anyway, cetaceans. Crustaceans are mollusks and things. Not quite what I had in mind. Cetaceans, thank you very much. Right? Cetaceans, thank you. Cetaceans are the whales and things. So big brains, bigger area, more cells. 1.1 trillion cells, 100 billion neurons. Each neuron has 5,000 little axons, right? They're firing at 5 to 50 times a second. That's a fuck of a lot of information going really fast. Something like 10 to the millionth power possible firings at any given 1/50th of a second. 10 to the, that's more potential neuronal firings than there are atoms in the universe. Complicated, big area. It doesn't seem like much. It's 3 pounds. It sits in a small area. But if you're an ant, getting across this room is like a light year or something. So it's proportional and relative. Anyway, so put that in combination with the evolutionary development, and you start to see what the emergent properties of a human being are. If the emergent property of a baby from crawling is walking, from walking to riding a bicycle, from riding a bicycle to driving a car, from driving a car to flying a plane, from flying a plane to going into space, And geologic time, you know you're very young, right? Geologic time, if you've seen that, I think, if we were a calendar, if life on Earth was a calendar, human beings appear on December 31st at 11:59 p.m. In other words, evolutionary time in terms of the history of the planet, humans been around for about a minute. So, just because your lifespan is 80, 90 years, evolutionarily, you're not even a baby. You're a thought. You're kind of an idea in your mother and father's yum evolutionary brain or something. So you start to get the idea that with emergent properties and complex brains and larger brains, things get bigger, they get more complicated. When you have one person, what do you have to manage? Duncan lived alone for a long time, so, potato chips and Coke cans on the floor and TV screen, that's all he needed. And in comes Karen, and all of a sudden there's green things and, table manners and, so on and so on. So, get my shots in early. I know I'm going to get some shots, so I'm getting first. Well, anyway, you get the idea. Big brains, evolution, so on. So I think in context of this, couple of very important points emerge. One is that we're moving into a new paradigm where nobody knows what it looks like yet, or nobody has a clear idea what it looks like yet, because we're crawling. We're not walking, we're crawling. And that new paradigm has something to do with the Aquarian Age, right? And it's a shift from the hierarchical Piscean top-down thing, Lama at the top, student at the bottom. I think that system isn't going to last much longer. I don't think anybody wants it, except maybe some Lamas. Right? And so on. So the Patagonian Indians, and again, this is a story I've told before, and you probably have heard it. And sometimes it's told about Australia, and sometimes it's told about Africa, but that's kind of secondary to the point. That when the big British European sailing ships sailed into the Patagonian waters of southern Chile, all the little tribes people with their bark loincloths and so on had never seen a ship before. Curiously, living on the water, they couldn't connect probably rowboats or canoes to three-masted brigands or whatever they were called. Except one Indian who had been up to the Lima area and had been introduced to them there. So that Indian happened to be in that Patagonian town when that ship arrived, and he was the only one who could see it, because he's the only one who had a previous knowledge of it. He's the only one who was prepared to see it. So when that ship arrived, he said, "Oh, there's this ship." Of course, they didn't have the language for it. There's no language for that. So without a language for something, does it exist? In any case, so he saw the ship, and the rest of the tribe couldn't see the ship, and then the people on the ship got out into their little boats and came to shore, and it was only when the little boat with the people in it, Europeans, came to shore that the natives could actually see them. And from their point of view, it was like they appeared out of nowhere, like magic, like a ghost, or like an apparition, or an illusion, Morgana, is it? Right? Like out of nothing, right? So out of nothingness appears, and of course we've been telling you this in meditation for quite some time. And out of nothingness appears, right? So what is the nature of seeing into nothingness? Well, it seems arguably that the reason we can see into nothingness is because we're evolving. We're constantly evolving, we're constant moving, and our ability to see out of nothing means, of course, that you have to be turning your attention from what? Something. If my eyes are focused on, the ape, the tree, and the other ape, I'm probably, not evolving as fast as the monkey is going. And thus, the seeking principle is the strongest drive in human evolution, and maybe species evolution that's going on. If you put a can of cat food on top of a pedestal, the cat will try to figure out some way to get it, right? And it's like, how do I get that food? So food is the primary driver in the reptilian brain, Relationship is the major driver, and memory is the major driver in the limbic brain, and planning and organization is the major driver in the cerebral cortex. Oh dear. Why do we need to manage and control things? Because they get way too complicated if you don't. Anyway, so the ship arrived and the people got off and they saw the people, and it wasn't until the Indians were put in the rowboats or whatever they were, the dories, and taken back to the big ship and allowed to get on it and touch it and walk around it and feel its constituent parts, because they didn't have sails apparently, and they didn't have like metal, and they didn't have planks, they didn't have machine-made parts. So because all those machine-made parts got put together in a form which maybe arguably should have been recognizable, they couldn't do it. It was a step too far. It was a new paradigm for them, right? So there's a scene in that Mel Gibson movie. Thank you. Apocalypto. At the end, where the Indians have been burned by other Indians. In other words, the more advanced Indian tribe enslaved, the more primitive, for lack of better language, Indian tribe. And so now one group of Indians managed to create their freedom, escape to North America, to the jungle again, where they came from, back to their roots. But as they're walking along, the last scene in the movie is a European sailing ship coming into their harbor. They're going from the frying pan into the fire. But evolutionary speaking, inevitable. So the movie ends with them kind of turning back into the forest. So I guess Mel Gibson would have you believe that the better place for humanity is going back into the forest. Right? But thank God he's not actually God yet. Trying, and may he succeed. But, the movement is always towards the greater complexity, the greater organizational ability, the bigger brain, and therefore the more we need management, the more we need skills, the more we need, right, and so on and so on. Make sense so far? So when it starts to get big, you need management. You need organizational tools. You need to put things together, right? You need to work things together. Even as human beings, you say, well, I'm an emotional being, but you wouldn't be an emotional being if your brain hadn't developed the receptors and the neuron capacity for memory, recall, right, recognition. All of this is a bigger brain than a crustacean. Well, arguably, a crustacean moves away from pain, moves towards pleasure. Right? These are one of the three huge aspects of the ego, right? Separation, boundaries, stability, and moving towards pleasure and away from pain. This is, and that has to be managed, doesn't it? You have to go, if I step off that cliff and fall 15 feet, that's going to hurt. A monkey might not even think about it. They jump, they grab a twig, they grab a branch down the ground, they're off, right? But as certain talents and abilities develop, other things fall away. Now, conjoin that with the idea that our evolution into the plains and the savannas, right, helped us develop a dropped voice box, larynx, so that our sounds and communications could become more complex. You have a conjuncting or a reinforcing evolutionary thrust. You have the bigger brain, you have the erect posture, you now have free hands, horsemanship for reins, management, also from the word hand, we said management. So now that you can manage your hands more, you're upright, you got thumbs and bums. Bums to hold you from falling over, right? And thumbs so you can manipulate and turn objects, and at the same time, or at least relatively the same time, your voice box is dropping. The evolutionary changes in your larynx and so on are occurring, right, to make you more capable of communications, more complex communications, more abstract communications. All of this requires some sort of organization or control to be able to work within the boundaries of what you're doing. So, along comes more complicated language, bigger brains, yada yada, you need more management. And you need more restraint, and you need more control in order to keep the thing functioning, right? Again, 1.1 trillion cells, 100 billion neurons. That's 1/10 to the millionth power possible firings. Imagine if they all went at once. You'd be completely overwhelmed. So as we evolve, the mirror neurons and the spindle cells evolve, right, and so on and so on. So we get to the point of the Patagonian Indian, and what happens next? Well, what happens next we don't know, because we're not there yet. From the point of view of what happens next, we're Patagonian Indians. From the point of view of what happens next, we're apes walking out of the savannah. But there are some early indicators. Right? And the early indicators are being indicated by the evolution of our brain. And who has the spindle cells and the mirror neurons? The great apes and the cetaceans. What does that tell you? Spindle cells, mirror neurons, bigger brains. Only the great apes have the spindle cells and the mirror neurons. The mirror neurons are for control and restraint. The spindle cells, or is it the other way around? And the spindle cells are for empathy. Right? Empathy, understanding, the ability to, just make sure I got them in right order. Reverse, sorry. Right? The spindle cells are for rapid communication, control of social behavior, recognition of error and emotion, and self-awareness. And then their mirror neurons support empathy, understanding, language, and imitation. So what's next? Who knows? But the argument I'm going to present here is group guru. And therefore you need more management, more restraint, more understanding, more communication, more working as a team, more group effort, i.e. now as apes, right? More training fundamentally. So you could just substitute the word training, and it would also cover the range. So what was the Buddha called in Salutation to the Buddha? Trainer of gods and men. What do you think about training? Exactly. But you wouldn't be here without training. Ruth wouldn't be a dancer, Catherine wouldn't be a writer, Linda wouldn't be a teacher, right? Maya wouldn't be a dancer. Right? I mean, to call Maya a dancer, natural talent. I mean, you can call a 5-year-old kid jumping around a dancer, right? But to call them a dancer implies some sort of training, some sort of professional development, even if she does it herself, right? There's still if I do this or that, that works better than if I do this or that. For this purpose, that's training. So the training aspect's huge. And evolutionary speaking, we never like training because training implies a trainer, which implies
authority.
Well, yeah, that's the old paradigm. The old paradigm is authority. The new paradigm is interdependence. You're not alone. You're not a single, separate, isolated individual only making decisions for you about you as if that was the paradigm. The paradigm is interdependence, intercommunication, dialogue, relationship, communication, training, management, restraint. That's not the whole story, right? You still have the limbic brain for expression and emotion. Right? And it's because of these things, by the way, they argue, and again the science is still iffy, they argue that that's why we have autism and schizophrenia, right, and so on, because the spindle cells and the mirror neurons aren't just working very well. Right? And evolutionarily speaking, right, nature will sacrifice an individual in order to promote the species. It always has, always will. It's what it's about. So from the point of view of the individual, evolution is not a great idea. Because I might have autism or schizophrenia or emotional disturbances or sociopathology or anything can go wrong. The more complex the organism, the more likely for error, the more likely things are going to fall apart, but also the greater potential. So from the point of view of the individual, right, if so far as it's working, you want to just keep it stable, fixed, and under control, right? From the point of evolution, evolution saying, right? That doesn't create bigger brains that allows us to fly airplanes from Canada to Australia and be there for breakfast tomorrow. The greater the complexity, the greater the freedom. So, that's the management, right? Comes down, in a sense, to training, and we're training for what? So, what are we training for? Agriculture was kind of training. We think, we're not sure when agriculture developed, but it was about 100,000 years ago, something like that. Remember, we're talking, the universe is supposedly 9 billion years old, right? Humans show up, as I said, on December 31st at 11:59, right? So, training for what? Well, it seems like the training is to work more and more like a organism rather than isolated individuals. You can look at the body this way, right? You have a single cell, and you have a group of cells saying, then a cell by definition, if it's alive, it implies what? Inputs and outputs. There goes your single, separate, independent entity right there. The minute you walk into a room, you're getting inputs. You're getting inputs through other people. You're getting inputs through your senses. You're getting inputs through your endorphins and your neurotransmitters, right? And none of them are isolated, fixed, solid, independent in you that you're under control of, in spite of most of what goes on in your awareness is out of your awareness. Most of what's going on in your organism is out of your awareness. They figure something like 90% of your neurological firings is outside your awareness. And remember what we said, I think it was, yes, spindle cells, self-awareness. So you don't even get self-awareness until you get spindle cells, and spindle cells don't arise until. So you see the thrust. So agriculture shows up whenever it is 100,000 years ago. Pardon me if my science is a bit floppy, but I'm after the point, so bear with me if I'm making some gross scientific errors. But agriculture shows up as a higher form of organization, management, rather than starving to death through the winter like the Eskimos, right? Because you can't find the meat. You have a storage of seeds or nuts or grains or grasses or whatever. And of course, with larger, more developed management systems, agriculture, you also start to get ownership. That's the old paradigm. Who owns the grasses? Who owns the seeds? Monsanto, I guess. Who owns the seeds? Who owns the grasses? Who owns the stores of food? Who's in control of that? Right now you need more management. You need more restraint. Don't eat all the seeds in November. You got to get to March, right? So then you need a hierarchy. Now you have armies and kings and queens and nobilities, and you have this whole pyramid, and then along comes larger masses of number, greater developments of the brain, more sense of fair play. So World War I arguably was the end of the nobility. When World War I came, the nobility basically was finished. Right? Because who are we going to war for out there? Who is dying in the trenches of Verdun? And have I got the right war? And whatever other trenches there were, the gassing, and I mean, you come back from World War I, and your captain or your commander is like from the upper class. You're a little slow to go to World War II. You get down there and fight in the trenches. Now, I'm not. A lot of the aristocracy died also, because in World War I, the aristocracy were at the front of were the commanders and leaders, so they were at the front of the army. World War II, they learned their lesson. They stayed at the back, and so World War II was the end of kind of the end of the manufacturing age, really. It was the beginning of the information age. So you see this constant evolution, right? It's like, we can wipe each other out with guns. So let's not fight those wars, because they finally realized that if we fight a war, it's going to hurt us as much as it hurts view, especially with nuclear bombs and stuff. So the human evolution, I mean, arguably, we haven't done it yet, touch wood, but arguably they go, this doesn't, no, this is the brink of this system, and we're going to step back. So now the new war is fought on the floor of the state capitalist stock market. Now we fight for information. Yes?
I just wanted to ask if management primarily comes out of that division of labor or specialization.
Yeah, of course. The more, if she's going to do the dishes, sweep the house, raise the kids, make the pies, then you're going to go hunt the protein. And this is the whole nature of the human being. Apes, as I said earlier, that apes have survived not because they're great individuals. They've survived because they work together. They work in teams. They have warning systems. The birds even have, here comes the cougar, right? Or get up in the tree, or, okay, you guys do the seed gathering and these guys do the protein hunting. And different skills and different functions, different tasks require different talents, right? So the male arguably became stronger and more muscle-bound because of the need to hunt and defend, and the female became rounder and fatter and softer because of the need to have food resources available for the child and so on. So, but also the communication skills arguably are much stronger in women than men because their job required more talking to keep the bears away. If you're picking berries, so the more noise you made, right, the more likely the bear wouldn't be disturbed. You make a lot of noise on the hunting trail and you come back hungry, right? So men learn not to talk, or to talk minimally. And the skills in hunting are more individual. If I'm hunting a mammoth, I want to know the guy on my left and right isn't going to run, because if he does, I'm dead. We only survive because we work together. So that men working in offices is hunting the great mammoth, women sitting around having tea and picking berries and cleaning fruit, right? More communicative skills in a different style. So you can see how that happens. Well, if you look at it from the point of view of the old paradigm, the Piscean model, there's a hierarchy, there's a top-down, the king speaks, the minister speaks, the assistant minister speaks, and then down at the bottom there are the people who listen. But that paradigm is passing out because, of course, in information technology, right, everybody's speaking. And with movement of peoples and so on, everybody's talking. So the agricultural manufacturing model works within the Piscean age. Well, the Taurian for the agriculture and so control of sensory function, food. And then with the Piscean age is control of resources, management in a way. And with the Aquarian age, what's it going to be? Well, the current indicators indicate group mind, group functioning. In other words, rather than seeing ourselves as single, separate, isolated individuals that are doing our own thing, if we're going to survive, we can't do that anymore. We can't do our own thing and have climate change. Otherwise, there won't be. So the nuclear bomb of our age is probably climate change, right? And we haven't got there yet. We haven't. We should have, but we haven't. In terms of our consciousness has not yet got to the point where climate change is the nuclear bomb of our age. Right? If we don't step back from that, then we're not here. And we have big brains. And big brains are built for management, restraint, and training. Right? Now, we don't like training, we know that. But on the other hand, we wouldn't be doing what we were doing. We wouldn't be surviving as an individual without training unless we were kind of dependent on other people who had the resources who were willing to support us. Right now, it's only in the modern age that there are enough resources there to support people who aren't doing anything productive, like artists and musicians. In the old days, stick with me, guys. In the old days, right, an artist would also be a hunter, a musician would also be a farmer, I mean, you wouldn't just do art and music because you couldn't afford to have that kind of division of labor and survive. But now as we have more people, more complication, more resources, better management, better systems, so on, more people can survive. So I think we're quickly coming to the point where we recognize there's a carrying capacity on the planet, and it isn't 7 billion people, and that there is a limit to how we function in terms of our Gaia or our environment as a species, and we're quickly coming to our recognition of our limits on that. So you could say, does that make sense more or less? You more or less on the same page, I think, with that one? I think it's pretty unassailable so far. Well, arguably what is the driving force of evolution in terms of a principle, in terms of the intellect? Would call it Lama mind, that, or Guru mind, or awakening mind, or Christ consciousness. I don't really care what you call it, but the principle is the same, which is that the Lama mind is sort of the evolutionary tip of the wave, right? To trying to not just being integrated in terms of the past, right? When I say integrated, I don't mean always correct. I mean simply in touch, I suppose. Integrated in the sense of in touch, and in some ways in touch is integrated. But don't get the mistake in the hierarchical past of the Piscean that the great Lama knew all and was everything, and then your job is to aspire to be the be-all and end-all of the next great Lama, and then when you get to be the next great Lama, you get to sit around and do nothing while everybody serves you. Right? And then you'll be the great Lama, and you'll just sit around and have toast and coffee and have people do prostrations, and you can retire. Never have to work again. Right? And then I mean, that's the Piscean model, right? That as Namgyal Rinpoche called himself, the last of the red hot gurus. And that kind of sounds arrogant, but well, what the fuck. Anyway, so if it's the end of the red hot gurus, and I firmly believe it is, then what's the emergent property? Well, it's the beginning of the red hot group guru. What do you think about that? Individuals born in 1940, 50, etc. No thanks. I want to be independent. I want to be fixed. I don't want anything bugging me that I don't like. I want to be in control. I want to be separate. Don't get in my face. But that's not the way humans have evolved. And from the point of view of spindle cells and mirror neurons, you're not independent anyway. It's not even real. It's not even true. It's only true in that little management system up there, wherever it is, right, called this idea of a self. And the reason we built the self, or the reason the self was built, was as a management technique. It was a management tool, and management tools aren't inherently reality. Right? They're ways of organizing. There's nothing inherently real about Maya putting 10 people in a room and dividing them into giraffes and horses. Right? This is just an arbitrary division made in order to create a work of creativity, and to tell a story, or to present a feeling, or to even dance and music and idea. Right? So this nature of interdependence, this nature of intercommunication, this nature of we are all one in the Lama mind, and etc., right, is an evolutionary progression. It's a step forward. So in that sense, the universe is open source. The universe has always been open source. So you've heard the story, I think I've told that one also, about the Canadian mining company that had a problem with water, I think it was, in their shafts, mines, tunnels. And they had to get it out, and nobody could figure out how to do it. Maybe that wasn't the problem, I forget what the problem was. But anyway, they had some kind of problem, and they couldn't solve it, and they realized it would take a lot of resources and a lot of energy to solve that problem. Right? And so, completely uncharacteristic to mining companies, who are incredibly possessive about their resources and their information, because of course if you have this plot of land, and you tell everybody that you got all the gold over here, and this land is for sale, Right? What are you going to do? You're going to buy this piece of land and then start drilling sideways. Right? So mining companies are very protective about their information. But this company went against the Patagonian Indian and made their information open source and offered $1 million Canadian to everybody. Well, at that time it was, maybe $30 American. But anyway, made their information available, open sourced it on the internet, and offered $1 million. Anybody could solve the problem. Well, I don't know. I think they solved the problem in a week by some Hungarian guy, if I have my story right, and I may not, who wasn't even an engineer. He got the $1 million. The solution got made. It didn't cost the company nearly as much as they would have if they tried to do it in-house. Right? It didn't have to take up resources of the company to focus on the problem. Right? It was open sourced, and not only that, they got like 5 other good ideas, which I think people got some reward for. So and now they also have a resource base of people who don't even work for their company, and it was a promotion, in a word, if you will. It was a promotion or an opportunity for all these other people to contribute and to maybe find other contacts. Right? Now the ego doesn't like this idea. The ego doesn't like the idea of open sourcing because it makes it seem
redundant. Redundant?
No, I don't think maybe redundant in the sense of everybody's better at everything than I am.
Position is
unsafe, insecure, threatened, challenged. And that Patagonian Indian, when he's seen that boat and sees this thing coming in, a huge challenge to his world. And not just in terms of, the boat's going to change the way we go about our business. It's like, these people are so much more powerful, so much more intelligent, so much more capable, so much more rich, so much more talented. We're just going to be wiped out. It's survival. And how does the ego survive? Separations. There you go. I'm not, this is other, this is me. Stability, meaning keep that boundary there. I'm not changing. I don't want to go to this guru thing. I just want it. So in the old system, so I'll rise up through the ranks. I'll become the great guru. Then they'll serve me, right, or whatever, right, or I'll have great ideas, and then I'll still be separate, untouched by anybody or anything, non-communicative in the sense of any real communication. Well, not just real. Not that that's not fair. But there is real communication going on, but it's not communication as a tribe. It's only communication as a hierarchy, right? Thus, this paradigm is falling apart. The combination of email, the internet, television, movies, Occupy Wall Street, raves, mosh pits, love-ins, going back in time. They weren't really love-ins, they were just anti-hate-ins, and anti-hate-ins are equal to love-ins until you didn't get the girl, and then it was a hate-in. Right? And mosh pit, where we're all together until, you knock each other out because you bash your heads together too hard, or, it's all fun until someone loses an eye, right? And so on, and now the internet, and now the latest things are like Occupy Wall Street, and social ventures, and NGOs, and so what's the emerging paradigm? When Harvard Business School, arguably one of the most prestigious business schools in the world, right? When Harvard Business School starts to look for their MBA, Master of Business Administration candidates, they're looking in the realm of people who have good social skills, more than analytical abilities or huge math degrees or smart brains. They're looking for people who have good interpersonal skills because they realize that business is about managing people. When did we learn that management was about people? We thought management was about resources and information and ownerships and properties. No? And now, as Duncan will probably tell you, right, the cost of replacing an employee at McDonald's is something like $30,000. Now imagine if you have people rotating through your business that quick. Every time you get a new employee, $30,000. Even if it's just a dishwasher, right? So in the old model, companies try to keep everybody part-time. It's for business, consultants and part-time people are good. You're not paying medical, you're not paying pension maybe, you're not paying unemployment insurance. It's good for business to have you part-time and contract. But if you have a full-time employee and you have to do all these things, unemployment insurance and medical and so on, and you lose that employee, you got to start all over. It costs about $30,000 a person. So, the lights go on. Where do the neighbor school to Harvard is? MIT, and where does Peter Senge teach? Management, the fifth discipline. MIT. Where does Noam Chomsky come from? MIT. It's amazing he keeps his job. I don't know. He probably started to be radical after he had tenure. Once he had tenure, then he started to make a noise. Now, this is really smart too, because this is one of the way the state capitalism, and there's no such thing as private capitalism. It doesn't exist. It's all state capitalism. In other words, the government gets you to pay for the research for the new products, and then NASA or the American military develop them, and once they get up to be a place where they're viable, they hand them over to business. Right? So business uses the military, the Pentagon, and the government in order to get you to pay for their technologies. And once the technologies are up to the place where they can make money, they take them back into the private business. And so therefore, private business doesn't have to spend any money. You spend the money to do that, and that's great because we got the internet from them. Right? We even got the weapons of their own transcendence. They gave them to us. Right? Like I think what's his face. Robert Moore, Roger Moore, Billy Moore, Bobby Moore. What's his name? Michael Moore. Michael Moore. Somebody asked Michael Moore how he gets his own TV show, and he said, "Well, they're just so interested in wealth, and I provide them with viewers, and therefore I make the money, so they'll show anything if it makes them money, even that which destroys their own paradigm." And thus the environment. We're eating ourselves out of house and home, right? Or shitting in our nest, or whatever you want, because the underlying, overarching motivation of capitalism is wealth accumulation, profit. And so we're starting to get to the point where we realize that profit worked when you had 1 billion people and huge resources and lots of space. Profit when you have 6 billion people and not so much space and resources are dwindling is an evolutionary nuclear bomb. So, assuming this argument has any kind of merit, we're moving to a more information-based society. We're moving to a greater degree of interdependence, a greater